Okay.
Right. So, warm greetings to all of you colleagues. My name is Mr. Privilege, and I'm a tutor with Grad Quest Consulting. That will be helping to facilitate you colleagues with respect to AUI 4862 throughout this 2025 academic year. So one of the things I wanted to lay out as a foundation is to give you guys perspective with regards to the structure of this module, what topics you're going to be looking at, the kind of assignments you'll be expected to complete for the purpose of this module, how we're going to, of course, conduct our classes and on and so on and so on. So essentially, I think before I even get to the module content or the assumed knowledge, so to speak, let me take you a step back just to give you perspective in regards to that. So the purpose of this engagement, I just wanted to talk about primarily the module content aspect, then the assignments aspects. So those are the two primary focus areas on tonight's discussion. So these other aspects, you really don't need to worry about it because it's something that I already explained to you guys offline. So without any further ado, so let's begin then, of course, with the module content, and then we can discuss about the assignments later. So AUI 4862, it's one of those important internal auditing modules of note, especially for those of you that have been enrolled into the postgraduate diploma in internal auditing with UNISA. So what is then the structure to note with regards to this module? So there are 6 important topics to note in AUI 4862, and I call this assumed knowledge. So you'll discover that as I carry you through the various topics in this module, I would quite often mention the term assumed knowledge. Assumed knowledge. So normally when I'm saying assumed knowledge, I'm simply referring to the important, it could be relating to this topic. It could also refer to the learning objectives that you need to achieve in that in a particular topic as well. So that's what I refer to as assumed knowledge under normal circumstances. So in topic number 1, right? Topic number 1, it introduces you to the concept of corporate governance and ethics in different organizational environments. So of course, for each one of these topics, apart from topic 1, of course, which I'm trying to explain to you now, there are sources of reference to note. In other words, there are textbook texts or textbook chapters that you need to refer to when you're dealing with some of these topics. So what I did for the purpose of each one of these topics, I tried to to give you an outline regarding to the sources of references that you need to be aware of with regards to each one of these respective topics. So beginning with topic 1, corporate governance and ethics in different organizational environments. These are your essential sources of reference. So there are 2 primary or 2 essential sources of reference based on the prescribed text according to your lecturer. Number 1, it is your audit notes, or what they call Jackson and Stans. The most recent edition it was actually the 13th edition, right? So by the time, of course, when I did this presentation, it was the 12th edition, but these editions, they are released on an annual basis. So of course, in this 2025 academic year, it would be the 13th edition, and more precisely, it's usually your topic number 4. So it's very important to take cognizance of that. So in topic number 4, when you go to your audit notes or your Jackson and Stans, they actually explain in a greater detail pertaining to this concept of corporate governance, and they also touch on the aspect about ethics in different organizational environments. Then there is one of your other important textbook, but this is really part of the prescribed textbooks as well. It's your internal audit perspective textbook. Internal audit perspective textbook. It is bluish in color. It is bluish or blue in color. I'm going to open these textbooks just so that at least you have an idea. I've got them in soft copy, so you can at least have them as a point of reference and for easy study as well at individual level. So in internal audit perspective textbook, you find this concept dealt with in a greater detail in chapter number 5 of that particular textbook. So in chapter number 5, they really deal specifically with ethics in different organizational environments. So it's primarily much more to do with ethics. Yes, there are aspects about corporate governance, but not as much in detail as compared to what you'd find in the audit notes. But and also they do tap into the concept of corporate governance in chapter 2 of the internal audit perspective textbooks. But why I'm referring specifically to chapter 5 in that textbook is because it deals with the concept about organizational ethics. That is the reason why I'm referring you to this. So I think just to give you also perspective practically, so I'm going to open those textbooks now so you can at least have a glimpse of what I'm trying to put across to you. So if you can just allow me a moment to do that. Going to open just in a moment. The version I'm opening of the audit notes is not really, it is the one. But this is a bit of an old version of the textbook. The reason why I use this one often when I'm presenting my sessions or classes with you guys is because I have made footnotes, or should I say notes in the textbooks. You'll notice there will be like footnotes which are there, where I emphasize, for instance, on important information that you may need to grasp on on a particular chapter. So for instance, in chapter 4 of this textbook, you discover this is where they deal in a greater detail concerning the concept of corporate governance. And you'd notice also that they introduced you to the King 4 report on corporate governance. So there are different sections of the King 4 report outlined in form of principles that you would be introduced to in this chapter of the audit notes. So there are about, I think, 17, if not 16 of those principles. Yes, 17 principles of the King 4 report that you need to be aware of. So for instance, there's principle 1 that will deal with leadership in business organizations. There's principle 2 that would deal with organizational ethics, which is, of course, it comes handy with regards to topic number 1 in this module. Then there are other principles, of course, as you can see outlined on your screens, but we're going to get into the broader detail of these as we progress. Now, for the purpose of giving you a broader picture, you need to be very much cognizant of principles 6, 7, and 8. They are very important in this module. Why I'm saying so, it's because I've seen with questions that they bring in their assignments and questions sometimes also that you find in past examination papers, they test a lot pertaining to principles that are dealt with in principles 6, 7, and 8. Very, very important. Now, that was just to give you perspective of your audit note. Then I want to open the internal audit perspective textbook, just so that at least you can be able to see that textbook. So there are 3 primary prescribed textbooks in this module. So there's this internal audit perspective textbook. There's internal audit and introduction, which is green in color. And there's performance audit assurance, which is orange in color. So there are really 3 prescribed. And then there's a recommended one, which is the audit notes that I just recently opened for you. Are you following? Are we still together?
Yes, I'm with you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I just want to open internal audit perspective. I hope I have it here on this laptop device. But what I did is I took some information from my other laptop, which I normally use for presentation purposes, but I've been experiencing technical glitches with it since yesterday. So I think it could probably be a hardware problem with it, which is something I'm going to address within the course of this week. But I really want to open that internal audit perspective textbook just so that you can be able to see what I'm trying to put across to you. So there's one other textbook that's just opening now. It's one of your prescribed. It's not really the one that I want to explain about or the one that I was referring to in regards to topic number one, but it's also part and parcel of your prescribed textbooks, performance of internal audit engagement. So this is the orange textbook, but then the one that I want to put across is the blue in color textbook. So I'm just quickly looking for where I could have saved it here. If you can just allow me a moment to open it here.
Okay.
It's going to open just shortly. Yes, there it is. I'm gonna open just now. Just bear with me. Yes, there we go. So this is the internal audit perspective textbook that I was referring to as part of your sources of reference pertaining to chapter number one. So I just want to quickly show you how it looks like. I know it might not really be anything new in terms of these textbooks. Probably might have used them at undergrad level. Just to, okay, maybe let me ask this question offline. Uh, yeah. Okay, so this is the textbook, assurance and audit perspective. So basically the way I said it, it's internal audit perspective, right? So very important. This is the textbook of note with regards to topic number one, and more precisely, chapter 5 of this textbook. It deals with organizational ethics, as you can see. So it is one of those important chapters of importance pertaining to topic one, corporate governance and ethics in different organizational environments. Now, you might be wondering, why is it that I took time emphasizing a bit about corporate governance and ethics in different organizational environments? It's simply because they love to test you guys a lot when it comes to this concept. You may find, for instance, in a setup of an exam, this concept alone, it can weigh from 30 sometimes to 40% of the entire examination. So that's the magnitude of importance that it carries. Hence, I was emphasizing a lot in terms of even the sources of reference that you need to take cognizance of pertaining to this concept. Now, moving from topic one to topic two deals with the role of internal audit in providing assurance on corporate governance. So basically, we are still dealing with the same concept on corporate governance, but now we're looking at it in the sense of what is the contribution of internal audit function when it comes to corporate governance in an organization. What role do they play or do they perform when it comes to corporate governance in an organizational set up. So there are responsibilities that we are supposed to carry out as the internal audit function in an organization pertaining to corporate governance. Not only limited to that, but we also perform responsibilities even when it comes to risk management. We also perform certain responsibilities when it comes to control processes within the organization. It's very, very important to take cognizance of that. Now, so topic one, topic two, still really within the same umbrella of corporate governance. Topic number three, it then introduces you to a different concept altogether. And it's one of those also which which is very important to note. It's also one of those which is very important to note in this module, because risk management in different organizational environments, it weighs a lot also in the exam. It weighs a lot of in terms of percentage contribution towards your exam. It can be sometimes even more than 50% of the entire exam being centralized on risk management process. Sometimes it can, of course, be lesser depending on the lecturer's preference or on the lecturer's discretion, so to speak. Remember, also when they set your exams, it's not one individual that sets the exam. So it's different personnel, and then, of course, decide to say, look, for a particular concept, how much should it weigh in the, in this overall exam in terms of percentage accumulation, right? So risk management, from my experience and what I've observed over some years of teaching this module, and also having done the module myself, I discovered from my research that they really love to test you guys on this concept, and it's always there in your exam under normal circumstances, right? So anyways, in risk management in different organizational environments, your important point of departure or source of reference in this case, it would be, okay, sorry. It would be the internal audit perspective textbook again, and more specifically chapter 4 of the textbook. So chapter 4 of this textbook, it deals with the concept of enterprise risk management. It's a very, very broad topic, because you can see it from pages 75 probably up to pages 100 and maybe 40 or so. So it's a very broad topic, a very broad concept to grasp. But don't worry, I would endeavor to ensure that you guys are well equipped in terms of understanding the concept, and of course being able to apply it in the context of a question as well. So now, risk management process. So there will be applicable slideshows which I'm going to provide to you guys to help to explain and expound further on the concept. So there are summarized notes anyways. For most of these topics that you will see that which I'll present to you guys, there will be summarized notes that I will be using to present the session. Just maybe to illustrate, I'm going to open the notes for topic 3, which is on risk management. So let me quickly open it just so that you can have a perspective in regards to that. So one thing I can assure you is that AUI 4862 is very much doable. You can actually excel in it.
Is it?
Yeah, you can. I can assure you of that. There are several students that have passed through my hands by the grace of God, and they really did exceptionally well in this.
I also wish to be like them.
Yeah. No, you will be, don't worry. All right, so this is AUI 4862, topic number 3, which is risk management. So I have structured the notes in this manner. So there's one consolidated one. This is just part 1. So what I did is there's part 1 and there's part 2 of these notes. But basically, my notes will be pretty much more like this, you know. So where I will be where I basically summarize the important aspects on a particular principle or topic that I may be explaining to you folks. So it will be very easy for you guys to follow through. And we'll also do some practicalities. I mean, it's not just a matter of giving you guys theory without being able to use it. You need to be able to apply the theory in the context of an exam, in the context of an
Yeah,
assignment.
if ever they give us a
Yes,
scenario,
yes.
I should be able to apply my
You
knowledge.
you should be able to apply this knowledge in the context of a scenario, practical scenario. So that's where I fit in now to ensure that you are better equipped to, to apply that knowledge in a practical sense. So because remember, at postgraduate level, the auditing it's more application more than anything, So as much as you can be having the understanding or semantic background of principles and stuff, you need to also be able to apply it in a practical case scenario. See, and that's what these lecturers are looking for. They're looking at your ability, your capability to apply these principles in a practical scenario, because that's what you're going to face in practice. You are going to be dealing with the application the more than dealing just with explaining of principles to people. Right.
Yeah, true.
Awesome. So I think, that was just to give you perspective on that. So let me just close that one, and then we can come back here. And then topic number 4, guys, it deals with role of internal audit in providing assurance on risk management. So again, it's still a continuation on the principle of risk management. And then this chapter or topic number 5 deals with control in different organizational environments. And lastly, topic 6, role of internal audit in providing assurance on control process. It's a really just a continuation of the previous concept, control in different organizational environments. Now, you might have noticed that there are footnotes that I put across here, especially, for instance, with regards to risk management in different organizational environments. So I just want to quickly help one to understand why I have these footnotes here and what am I explaining really. So what I was trying to put across to students when I was putting that footnote together, the ideal thing is to say, look, the traditional approach of questions which the lecturers normally use, right? And you'd find this in the assignments, sometimes even in the context of the exam. The traditional approach usually would be for you to, I mean, basically what they'll ask you in the context of an exam, for instance, right? It will be for you to identify, excuse me, let me just try to move this. Better, right? So the traditional approach, usually in the context of assignments, when it comes to this concept, they would ask you to identify control deficiencies, right? In the system description, meaning in the case study, right? And sometimes, and when they ask you for that, you need to understand what it means when we say control deficiencies. Control deficiencies, in other words, would also imply identifying of weaknesses. So a control deficiency is the same thing as an internal control weakness. And in other contexts, it can also refer to what we call red flags. That is, if there's a question more related to fraud auditing, but you would find fraud auditing in AUI 4863, the more, right? And then also, sometimes they can ask it as a fraud indicator, right? So if a red flag or a fraud indicator, it's meaning one in the same thing. So you can also be asked about this in AUI 4863, but essentially all they are simply asking for, they are really asking for a control deficiency. And a control deficiency usually is a condition that you find whenever control activities that are put in place, perhaps, are not achieving, they are not achieving purpose at all. So that's number one condition. So a control deficiency is considered to be existence if, number one, the control activities in place are not achieving purpose, meaning to say they are ineffective. Number two, it can also be a situation whereby the control activities in place are not being performed or implemented correctly, right? If they are not being implemented correctly, it would mean there's a gap or a deviation from policy and maybe certain approved standards that are not being followed. So whenever there's conditions like that, that would signal a control deficiency. And also sometimes a control deficiency can be existence if there are no control activities being performed at all. No control activities being performed at all. In other words, when control activities are non-existent, when control activities are non-existent. So when we see a situation or a condition like this, that should tell you that there's a control deficiency in the system description. In other words, in the way that the organization is performing or carrying out its activities, right? So that could be one of the traditional approaches which they can use to test you on this concept of risk management. But remember, it doesn't come in isolation where they'll ask you to identify control deficiencies or these weaknesses. They can then ask you as a follow-up question to identify risks. Now that you have identified a control deficiency, give us the potential harm, the potential danger that an organization could encounter as a result of the condition which is not suitable for them, which is that control deficiency, of course. So if the control deficiency is not addressed, what is the danger? What is the harm, the negative outcome that the organization can encounter due to that? And that's what we call a risk, guys. The negative outcome. You're going to find these things, negative outcomes. Right? That's basically what risks are. So usually a negative outcome would occur if you don't address a control deficiency or you don't address a weakness in your system description. Right? And then, of course, another follow-up question to that would be for you to give recommendation or what we call mitigation actions or internal control activities to address. And very important sometimes what they do, if they ask you, for instance, a question about weaknesses, the accompanying follow-up question with it, it will be for you to give recommendations. So it's not always the case where it will be question one, you identify control deficiencies, then question two, identify risks, and then question three, give recommendations. It's not always going to be like that. But traditionally, it can be portrayed in that manner. However, sometimes they can bring it in this set whereby it can be a question of weaknesses and then you give recommendations. So your recommendations should be addressing the weaknesses that you would have identified. Now, that's one way. Then the other way would be where they ask you to identify risks. And then the follow-up question would be for you to give recommendations to address those risks. Very important. So it can also be portrayed in that setup, right? So yeah, that's what I was just trying to to lay out for you guys here. So perceived approach number one, they ask you to identify inherent risks and to indicate or to give a risk factor. They can also ask it in that manner, or they can ask you to give a risk category or the type of the risk that you would have described in this case. They can also ask it in that sense, right? But I think I'm going to give you more details on this when I get to this topic. I don't want to get too much into detail in this section, so rather in this particular session, because really it's an introductory session, just so that we lay foundation on what we're going to be dealing with as far as this tutorial engagement on AUI 4862 is concerned, right? So this, what you have here on your screen right now, this is just to give you a perspective in terms of exam structure, what you can find and all. But I don't want to touch on this as yet. Why I'm saying that is because there was a slight change in the exam structure from the traditional approach to what they brought, for instance, in the previous academic year. So there are some of those changes. So I'm going to of course address that and put it across so that you can be able to see the differences. Because obviously, one of the things you're going to also do as you do your practice, your own personal study, you would need to refer to some of the previous sources of materials like past exam papers, excuse me, past assignments. You need to also have that as your point of reference, right? So obviously, when you use such information, you need to take cognizance of how does it relate to the current approach of testing which the examiners are using, because there was that slight difference from the traditional approach in comparison to what they did in the previous exams which were written in the previous academic year. Right. So, but one of the key differences, to be frank, which I picked up, I may not really need to put this in writing for now. What I picked up is that they would bring a scenario as in the sense of how it could be portrayed in a what you call this report, integrated report of an organization. Right. So, and then they would also bring things like risk maps, something of that sort, which is not really what they used to use when they were testing in the other previous academic years, somewhat. So, but otherwise, the rest of the other principles were really just exactly the same. So you don't really need to stress much about that. So I think having laid this as a foundation for now, in video B of this particular session, that's when I begin to introduce you guys to corporate governance as a principle. So thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to rejoin again on the same meeting link that I've already shared with you guys on the group. And then in that video session, in that video B, that's when I introduce you to corporate governance. Thank you, guys.